conversation. My name is Louise van Rijn. For those of you who may not know, I'm the founder of the Symphonia Group. I feel incredibly privileged to be able to lead this community and this organization. And part of the joy of being in this community is that we have the most amazing people in this community. And today you're going to hear from one of them. And if you hang with us, and there are many people on this call who have had many opportunities to be in these kind of conversations, you will know it's amazing every time. It is just so insightful. So before I hand over to Steve Hall, I want you to just, and this is for Steve's benefit, but also for my benefit, if you could in the chat just very quickly share why did you show up? What is it that you want to get? And I'm going to share with Steve and maybe Steve, you can share with us what you heard. But if we can have many people, everybody, if you are able to just in the chat share, why did you decide to join this particular session around that talks about leadership? And then and Steve, what I heard from Clifford, who said that, we need a new kind of leader today. The old frameworks and ways of thinking is just not working for us anymore. And Ian was saying that they see lots of leadership deficiency in the organizations that they work with. So I'm curious to hear, while people are sharing their thoughts, what did you hear? And in the small group conversation that you were in, why did people show up today?
Louise, I really was privileged to spend some time with Claude, with Terry Ann and Daniela. And I think there was some common themes. A lot of them were attached to my dad, which is so cool. And far from feeling that I've walked in the shadow of my dad, it is a wonderful privilege to have walked that journey with him. And so the reason for coming was a lot of the initial discussions I think we had a few weeks ago, and also around stories. I think we need to hear more positive leadership stories. We need to know that South Africa and these extraordinary people that we all engage with have got stories to tell, and they needn't be the Mandelas and the Gandhis and the Martin Luther Kings and the Steve Bikos, whose stories are very, very difficult to emulate. But they may be the everyday people who just see life through a very different or intriguing set of lenses. Clifford, I really enjoyed the thought around a different leadership framework. And I like the word framework. It's not a cage, but the framework may be something that we've got to think about. How do we, and I know that this is part of a reimagined leadership. And so maybe it is about, we are here to just reimagine together this thing called leadership, and it's self-leadership, and it's leadership of teams, and it's leadership of schools and communities. And that maybe there's another set of lenses. And so it brings, and I'm talking too much already, Louise, but it brings to mind this extraordinary concept of Sariti. In Sotho, there's a lovely word, Sariti, which means the dignified shadow of our potential, actually. It's the metaphysical shadow of our presence, not to be confused with Meriti, which is the physical shadow of the building or the car or the tree. The Sariti is the significant shadow we carry as human beings. I guess in English we would say it's our aura or our presence. And this concept alone really helped me in my relationship with my own dad, actually, because with his very, very big positions and titles at South African Breweries and Wooltrue and business leader, so many people during the course of my life said, well, how are you going to step out of your father's shadow? And this concept of Sariti is a far more inclusive concept. It simply means when my shadow of significance and your shadow of significance have overlapped, it means we've shared a part of the journey together. And that becomes holy ground between us. And so it's not a concept of better than or worse than, or create your own shadow, whereas in the Western sense, it's a threatening thing. Step out of your older brother's shadow, step out of your family's shadow, step out of your mom or your dad's shadow, create your own shadow. This is inclusive. And it means that there's no shadow that's better than anybody else. It's just where we share the journey. We've shared a significant part of our shadows together. And I love that concept. And I think more than anything else, it was the thing that really helped me to say, it's okay to walk in the shadow or with the shadow of somebody else. That's really cool.
So we're not going to talk too much today about your relationship with your dad, but we can spend the entire day talking about that. And it's actually a really interesting conversation. So maybe we'll do another call with Steve and Annie's dad and talk about it. But I want to today, Steve. So we did, when we looked at where are we going to fit you in which of our kind of series of conversations, we chose to put you in the series of conversations that's about reimagining leadership development specifically. And so just for everybody's benefit on the call, as many of you know, that over the last 12 years, we've been leading the Partners for Possibility work. And that came from a whole, many stories and experiences before that. But because of Partners for Possibility, we've developed a new understanding about our work. So it's like we've practiced what we preach. We have taken our own experience seriously. And from doing that, we've realized that actually underpinning all our work is this a way of thinking about our work, which we've termed seeing, being, and doing. And then I heard you talk. This is so interesting because I heard you talk about what you've learned from your time with Stephen Covey. So just for everybody's benefit, so seeing, being, doing, the intention there is that as I see and think about the world and the stories that I carry about the world influence how I'm being, and that has a massive impact on how I'm doing, which will then ultimately impact on what I'm getting. Now, I don't know to what extent what we've been developing is kind of on some level, we've been tuned into the work of Stephen Covey. My doctorate thesis was around paying attention to the stories we tell ourselves about the way things are. Steve, I don't even know whether you know that's one of the reasons when I hear you talk about the stories and the pictures and the lenses, it kind of just, that's been at the core of my work. So do you want to start, Steve, before we go into, so this book today we're going to talk about, we didn't specifically mention the book in the invitation, is Steve's book that has just been published. This is one of the very few copies in the country. And there are a few things about this book which is amazing. One is, yeah, it's just, I know how wonderful it is to have a new book, but you will see on the cover here that there's the lens has two color lenses. The one is red and the other one blue. Now, we have many people from Partners for Possibility on this call, and you will immediately go, well, we know that, we just kind of, we're looking for where's the green, but we understand the difference between red and blue. So Steve, if you could today, take us down a little bit of a journey around, and I'm going to take myself off the screen so that we can just all see you. So for those of you who struggle with having too many people at the same, if you choose the speaker view, then you can only see Steve when he speaks. And then that makes it so much easier for many people. So on your top right-hand corner of your screen, you may want to choose speaker view, and then that's going to only give you, you can only see Steve when he speaks. But I want you to start, Steve, by telling us a little bit about how did you come to think about leadership development, starting with how do we see the world, and what are the stories and the pictures we carry. And we're going to just listen, just for everybody's benefit. We're going to listen to Steve talk to us for about half an hour. Then we're going to create an opportunity for you to go into small groups to say, so what did I take away from that conversation? And just to make it easier, we're going to put you in exactly the same breakout rooms where you were before, so that you don't have to start from scratch in terms of where are you and where do you come from. So there's going to be an opportunity for you to just kind of make sense and say, so what? And then we'll come back and we'll have a kind of continue a conversation with Steve. But Steve, over to you, and we're going to hang off your every word. If you've ever experienced beautiful listening, delicious listening, you're going to get that today. This group of people listens delicious. They listen deliciously, and we're going to listen deliciously to you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Louise. In Zulu there, I think they might say Izibili Boto, which is delicious, absolutely fabulous, relating to food. But of course, if it's about listening, maybe there's a comparative there as well. Yeah, Louise, we've always said, you and I, actually, we need to do more work together. There are so many overlaps. There are so many things of comparison, of things we could build together, whether it's colors called red and blue, whether it's a model around seeing, being, doing, or see, do, get. There are so many things. And yes, I think this is the beginning, again, of a wonderful, wonderful journey. I guess going back a little, the first half of my life was what was called in the old South Africa. And it was a place where I knew the greetings of English and the greetings of Afrikaans. Those were the only two ways I could start conversations. Because of that, and being white and male, at the age of 18, I went off to the Air Force for 2 years. And I write about that a little in the book, although the book is not my story. The book is really a collection of other people's stories. And I hope they are everyday stories, because they are far more, they're just far more relevant, I think. You know, that it's the stories of people around us. It's the everyday heroes that really we can learn from and maybe even emulate. And in that old country, there was a particular set of lenses, and I'll talk you through those, but we're familiar with all of them, and to a large degree we're familiar with them in our corporate spaces, even in schools, sometimes in communities, even in jails. You know, hopefully we haven't, any of us, had experience there, but you never know. And
it looks like we've just lost Steve there for a moment. So I'm hoping he's going to come back. Steve, you were just, we lost you for a moment, but you're back.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I'm hoping that that doesn't happen. But at the end of 1989, I found myself in uniform supporting a very, very unjust system. I did it because I could justify it on the basis of I prefer not to go to jail. I'd prefer not to leave the country in exile. And so I did it because it was what most of us just did, without really thinking through it and without knowing. And in February of 1990, I'm a student at UCT celebrating the release of Nelson Mandela. And it was what we often refer to as one of these twists and turns along our own Sisyphus branch. The Sisyphus being an iconic tree that has many, many twists and turns along the branch of its journey. And at every twist and turn, there's an opportunity to reflect back along a hooked thorn and an opportunity to look forward along a straight thorn. And this was a turning point, an inflection point in my own life, where for the first time, maybe, I started to see a completely different set of lenses. I saw lenses of forgiveness. I saw lenses of a friendly world. I saw lenses of a connected and an infinite world. I started to see lenses where there were multiple versions of the truth, and where it wasn't a reliance on power or hierarchy getting things done. It was maybe things like energy and influence, which were even more effective. And so that really started the shift, I guess. And from that moment, I started to capture stories, essays, the odd bit of poetry, some of my own reflections, my own journal writing. And when COVID hit, the extraordinary opportunity for me was that it suddenly gave me time. I had, like many of you on this call, a diary that was just erased from being fully booked for 2020 to absolutely nothing within 24 hours. And at that moment, it was devastating, and for many people on this call, equally so. But this opportunity and gift of time allowed me to go back through all those writings over many years and sift out what could possibly be of interest to people in this moment, particularly from a South African perspective, but particularly also from life, leadership, and humanity. And that really got me on the journey of writing the book. And so if for a moment you'll bear with me, I'll go into just literally a couple of slides to position it, and then I'll go off slide and we'll share some stories. Please keep any questions flowing in the chat group. There'll be lots of opportunity, and Louise, I think, has given me around about 25 to 30 minutes of sharing, and then let's keep the conversation going. So if the slides are coming up, you should see the copy of the book there. With the back and the front. It's only at the moment available on Kindle and Amazon, but hopefully from next week, there will be physical copies available, and then there's a whole journey around distribution. But the real intention to everybody here was not for sales, but for conversation. Who would this be useful to create conversation as coaches? I know that, that Claude and I spoke very briefly earlier, and he's an executive and senior coach, and so was Daniela, I think, involved in the coaching world. And maybe there are stories here that help with a coaching conversation. Maybe there are stories here which help with a leadership conversation, or a conversation about bravery, or a conversation about resilience, or a conversation about hope. Because in this book are all these stories of everyday people who've seen the world through another set of lenses. The model, Louise, you've referred to is exactly right. For some time in 1994, I worked with Stephen Covey for the Covey Leadership Center at the time. And if any one piece of learning stuck out for me, it was this basic change model, which he referred to, the fact that we have pictures around us. We have paradigms, mental mind maps, pictures, and these are informed by our experiences, our religion, our culture, our upbringing, and certainly the media. We always, on our leadership weeks, make reference to your view on America depends on whether you watch CNN or Fox News. The way the media portrays Trump or America, or the battle at the moment between Israel and Palestine that's just flaring up again, is it around the sea? I hope my connection, I see it's unstable again. Are we okay still? Yeah, okay. And the way we see the world, of course, has a fundamental impact on what we do. Our behaviors result very often because of why or how we see the world. And again, it relates so closely to seeing, being, and doing. We do what we do because we see what we see. And I'll talk you through 6 polarities which make up, I hope, Clifford, the framework of the thinking. We do what we do starts to give us outcomes. Generally speaking, we get what we get because we do what we do. We get good matric results because we work hard. We get good outcomes with staff because we invest in them. We get good outcomes with customers because we really listen to their needs. Of course, there is a thing in between there called luck. Every now and then we do it well, we get a bad outcome, that's bad luck. Or we were just in the right place at the right time. We got a great outcome. We didn't do a great presentation, but we got the sale. Generally, we rule out luck as a strategy, but when we get what we get and it reinforces our picture, of course, this was the very basis of all of Covey's work around the 7 habits. And as a practitioner of leadership development, and particularly this word called training, which we're trying hard to move away from, I was very guilty of spending most of my life trying to change people's behavior. You know, just do it differently. Do the work more efficiently. Work harder at your exams. Smile at the customer. Follow the process. Read the manual. Attend the training sessions. It was all about do. And very little was focusing on how is it that we're seeing the world? What are the pictures, the paradigms that shape the very behaviors we adopt? And what are the stories, to your point, Louise, that we tell ourselves that result in the behaviors that get us the outcomes? And are we locked in this habitual cycle, which works beautifully, by the way, if we are happy with these results? It's fabulous. If I'm happy with the outcomes I'm getting, we're into a virtuous cycle of wonderful habits, and we can continue. What's fascinating is often if we are not happy with our outcome, what we tend to do as human beings is we try and reverse the whole cycle and say, okay, I'm not happy with this outcome. Let's do it differently. Fine. But if I haven't examined what's the picture that underlies the behavior, then maybe I don't get sustainable change. And I think that was the very framework that I've lived with for so long, and that has kind of got me back to thinking, so what are these pictures? What are the pictures that I grew up with in the first half of my life? And how maybe have they changed? And so very briefly, again, you're familiar with these colors of blue and red, but one of them that I refer to, and I'll share some stories, is that the world may be full of multiple truths. Are there multiple truths? Or did I grow up in a country that was generally about a single version of the truth, which at the time, of course, was called apartheid? The red view I refer to quite simply as a view of tension, and the blue view I talk of as a view of connection. Now, each of these polarities that I'll talk you through, of course, has a balancing point somewhere in the middle, or somewhere for each unit or community or leader. Just imagine this dotted line as a tightrope. And somewhere along that tightrope of these polarities, we need to find our own balance. And polarities are much like breathing. We've got to inhale and we've got to exhale. We're not in a life where we only inhale. And we're not in a life either where we can only exhale. These are both necessary, and not one is right or one is wrong. Not one is more important than the other. They are simply polarities. And in this case, this polarity hopefully supports a higher goal of constant learning and innovation. If I only have a lens about a single truth, which means I'm right, you're wrong, then I will never innovate and I'll possibly never learn. And it was wonderful to hear in my breakout group, the reasons why people were coming was to learn. Well, if there's only a single version of the truth, and my dear dad is on this call, and if it's only his version of the truth, then why have Steve speaking? Well, maybe there's another version of the truth, a multiple version. However, we can't only live in a world where there's only multiple truths. Sometimes we've got to agree on something. And so we find our balance along this particular polarity. In the book, I referred to an amazing story that many of you might have remembered from last year during lockdown, which became known as the story of the Coopers. Christian Cooper is a bird watcher in New York City, and he's walking through a place called the Ramble, which is designated not for any cyclists, and the only other rule is that dogs must be on leash. It is part of the nature reserve, and he's looking for birds. And around the corner comes Amy Cooper, and they're not related. And Amy Cooper's dog is off leash. And Amy Cooper panics when she sees this man walking through the Ramble in Central Park, and she starts to dial 911. And what emerges is this completely kind of panic around a single version of her truth. Because it turns out that Amy is white and Christian is black. And it happens on the same day as the murder of George Floyd, almost to the day a year ago. And the observation there for me was that imagine if she could have just viewed life through another lens at the time to say, this guy is a bird watcher. My life is not under threat here. My life is that she saw black man in Central Park as a single version of the truth. And so we bring that home to this beautiful concept in Zulu of stick fighting. And there's a wonderful phrase in Zulu, which is ukushaya ngezinduku ezimbili, which means I'm fighting with two sticks. Now, in the martial art of stick fighting, if a warrior has one stick, they are very vulnerable to attack. They have a stick for defense and a stick for attack. And if one of those sticks is knocked out of their hand, they are very vulnerable. And we were so intrigued when we walked through the markets, particularly of Warwick Triangle and the traditional healers markets, why people would use animal bones and animal products and plant products. I mean, surely these things are not going to help you medically. And the phrase we often heard was, we are fighting with two sticks. It means we've got a truth of Western medicine which we can use, but we've also got a belief on our own traditional healing, which can also work. And so for them, this was a multiple version of the truth. It wasn't one is right, one is wrong. We can use both. And I thought how fabulous that is. And I wonder how often we walk through life with a single version of our truth. Maybe we've got more. Maybe we've got more than one stick to fight with. And if my single version of the truth is, well, I'm your father, that's not going to work with my teenage daughter who's turning 18. And so I've got to work very much along our own balance. A second, this is a beautiful one. It's written up beautifully in a latest book by Simon Sinek on infinite games and infinite players. But is the world infinite or is it finite? And of course the answer is yes. It is both. Not one is right, not one is wrong. When it comes to resources, they are finite. When it comes to my time, it is finite. It is not infinite. But there are also infinite things in our world, like courage and bravery and resilience and hope and giving and coaching and leadership. How do you measure those things? And that we've got to find, again, in our teams, this balance between finite and infinite. And I learned this from a young age from my cousin, who sadly passed away when he was 17. He was due to be the head boy of Pretoria Boys High, and on his way back to be head boy was killed in a car accident. But he was a very, very keen squash player, and so was my dad. And I know this is not about my dad, Louise, but to bring him back into the conversation. My dad was also a very keen squash player, and the two of them had this incredible relationship. And every few months there would be a tussle between senior Colin and junior Colin on the squash court. And the bet was simple. If Colin Jr. could beat Colin Sr. before his 16th birthday, then Colin Sr. would take the family out for a meal on his account and place an advert in the local newspaper, in the Pretoria, what was it? There was obviously Johannesburg Star and Pretoria News, or whatever it might have been at the time, that Colin Jr. is a better squash player than his uncle. And if Colin Jr. lost, he had to place the advert. He was not expected to take everyone out for dinner. And these games became closer and closer and closer. And on the day before his 16th birthday, Colin Jr. dismantled Colin Sr. And Colin Sr. realized that he'd been played by what we called then an infinite player. Colin Jr. could have beaten him a year before. He could have. He had the talent, he had the skills. But he wanted the game to continue. The minute the game was over, there was no more family gathering, or there would have been, but there was no more of the banter, there was no more of the talk, there was no more of the support. And so he kept the game alive because there was an infinite sense of the relationship rather than the finite sense of the result. And I think we look at that in all our schools, in all our corporations, and say, you know, do we look through the lens of things being finite? Or do we look through the lens of things being infinite? And of course, again, the answer is, well, we find our balance. If we only look at the things that are finite, we will never get into the higher realm of generosity and sharing. Because if everything's finite, I'm not sharing it with you. There's a limited amount, and so it's mine. But if there's an infinite view, then perhaps we get more outcomes. The get is more generosity and more sharing. We look at concepts like resilience and bravery, and you know, there are just so many stories in this group today around that exact concept. And is one more important than the other? Is there a limited amount of stories of resilience, or have we done with resilience? Are there limited stories of bravery? Probably not. And I was so inspired. I saw a little YouTube clip which I wrote about a man called Chuck Yielding in Fort Worth in Texas. And his son Aiden has got a rare form of cancer. And because of COVID restrictions, his father can't visit him in the hospital. His son is on the 7th floor, has access to a window, and every Tuesday morning, his father arrives in a new pair of the gaudiest, colorful pants you've ever come across, and does this extraordinary dance in the car park. Now, I guess if you're a passerby and you see this guy dancing in his crazy dad pants, doing his own original form every Tuesday morning, Your lens might be, he's a nutcase, right? But when you know that he's dancing for his son, whose son says, I know I'm not alone because I can see my dad. Now, that's a story of an infinite connection, as opposed to a finite, you're allowed in or you're not allowed in. And so, again, stories illustrate each of these polarities. A third one, which I'm finding such a wonderful challenge at the moment, is the world friendly or is it unfriendly? When I grew up in the apartheid years, we were taught really that this world is unfriendly. Don't go to those places. Don't go to Soweto. Don't go to KwaMashu. Don't go to Katlehong and Tembisa. Because why? Well, because it's an unfriendly place. And then when we go there, we realize, my goodness, you know, the people here, the resilience, the courage, the friendship, the happiness. Is this world friendly or unfriendly? Yes. Right now in Israel, it seems to be a very unfriendly world. But right here in the cauldron of Johannesburg, there are friendly stories happening all the time. Now, again, this is relevant to me right now because my daughter's turning 18 on Sunday. If I try and teach her that the world is unfriendly and to view life through an unfriendly lens because I'm cautious as a father, well, what is the get? The get is a hermit. The get is somebody who never has a boyfriend, never goes out at night, will never learn to drive a car on the roads of Johannesburg, will never go down to the local grocer because everybody's there to rip you off, right? So if that's the extreme, what are we going to get? However, if I really go to the extreme of, don't worry, my girl, it is a friendly world. Everybody will be there to tuck you in at night and take whatever lift you like, come home when you want, wear whatever you like. Nobody's there to help, and nobody will spike your drinks. Well, I may be erring too far onto that side of the polarity. I may only be inhaling, and I need to inhale and exhale. I need to look at both sets of the lenses. And so somewhere between Hannah and I, we've got to find our balance, which is going to be completely different to Claude's balance and completely different to Clifford's balance and completely different to your balance, Louise. So that, you know, there are multiple stories, and each of these chapters, each of these polarities is framed with these stories. I've been privileged to do a lot of work in the bush, and we had the most extraordinary encounter with an elephant herd. And as we were encountering, they were relaxing, they were kind of enjoying our presence. It was a breeding herd. And that requires very, very in-depth skills as trackers and guides to be anywhere near them. And as we were viewing them, a construction vehicle drove up, full of people, full of construction guys in the back of this large truck. And immediately there was the sense of an unfriendly world. There was fear, there was scared, and we observed this to watch what happened on both vehicles. I mean, on both the elephant herd and on the vehicle. The elephant herd got closer. They clustered around their young. The big females came out to look a bit more threatening. And exactly the same thing was happening on the back of the vehicle. The people were clustering together. They were looking to each other for support. There was a sense of nervousness and fear. And somebody on the vehicle said, look at that. Both of them are protecting each other's hearts. And this sort of became, well, maybe this concept isn't just a human concept, but in all of nature, is it friendly or unfriendly? And the way we view the world may absolutely determine what is the behavior we adopt in that moment. Some of you will remember that story of that horrific blast in Lebanon about a year ago as well, maybe 9 months ago, leveling lots of Beirut. And I mean, Beirut has been through hell on earth a number of times in its history. And this was an extraordinary bomb blast. And a day later, there's a clip of an old 79-year-old woman playing the piano. The piano has survived this attack, and all she can do in this moment, in this still point, in this turbulent world, is play a tune. And of all tunes she plays, it's Auld Lang Syne, which Robert Burns wrote in the 1700s. And he spoke in that particular song about a cup of kindness. And it was a reflection for me onto, in amongst this extraordinarily unfriendly world, if we're open to it and if we're curious, we may see a friendly possibility. And that just gives us this thing called choice. And I think, if many of you are in a leadership development position or in skills training or certainly in education, and if we strongly believe that leadership is a choice, then how do I choose if I've only got one set of lenses? Because if I've only got one set of lenses, then I can really only have one set of choices. And so this started to hopefully, Clifford, again, I keep picking on you, but open up a framework to say, well, let's look at this through the potential of choice, that I can choose to see it as friendly, or maybe I can also choose to see it as unfriendly. And it may help me inform my behaviors and therefore get an optimal outcome or a get. There's just a few more, but let me quickly talk you through them, and then we can go to some questions and answers, or maybe not answers. I've always been inspired by the words of Rainer Maria Rilke, who said that we should live our questions now. Live our questions now, and then someday, maybe far into the future, without even realizing it, we will live ourselves into our own answers. And so maybe there are more questions than answers that emerge here.
So Steve, and maybe the answers are not. I just want to acknowledge that while you are speaking, Igno is sharing all these links to the stories that you are telling, and it's just breathtaking. So thank you, Igno. But just keep going, Steve. But just want to acknowledge Igno while you're doing it.
Thank you. I'm intrigued as to how you're finding all these links. Is it from the book itself? That's amazing. Thank you, Igno. It's hopefully creating a real live feeling in amongst an online session. This is it's a great lens, unique, or are we superior or inferior? And again, I think, you can apply all these red pictures to the old South Africa. You can certainly apply these red pictures right now to what's happening in Israel. It's this, if I only see the world as a superior or inferior lens, then I never move towards uniqueness. And if I never move towards uniqueness, I can't get to integration. Are we all unique, or are we superior or inferior? Now, of course, it's a polarity. The answer is yes, we are both, right? Because if we frame it as a squash player, then Colin Jr. was a better squash player than Colin Sr. at a point in time. South African rugby is the world champion right now because of a framed match of 80 minutes, which was an extraordinary experience. And in the book, maybe Igno, you can even put that out there. I wrote a poem during the World Cup final, which went viral. And the most amazing thing about this poem actually happened on Monday morning. The Monday after the World Cup, held on Saturday, the 2nd of November in 2019. On the Monday morning, as most of South Africa, we were in need of a cup of coffee. And I was having a cup of coffee. And the waitress, whose name is Theodora, leans across with my steaming cup of hot coffee and says, "Thank you for your poem." Now, my mindset is still very much on this red picture that, well, how does Theodora, the waitress, get a copy of my poem? How does she know? Surely, as a black woman, she's not into rugby. Or maybe my lens is, she doesn't have access to Wi-Fi and the viral things of the internet. Well, on Monday, she thanks me for her poem. And I said, "Theodora, how did you get this poem?" And her response was just eye-opening. She said, "I live in this world." Why for a minute did I think she didn't? It was because I had lenses and pictures of maybe superior, inferior. Maybe I never saw the uniqueness of Theodora, this amazing African woman who is passionate about rugby and who's connected into the internet. Why? Because she lives in this world. And so there was this extraordinary picture of uniqueness. Even though we think we're evolved over the age of 50, these lenses are constantly under challenge. We've got to constantly wipe them, clean them, maybe even repair them at the time. This forum, Louise, is certainly testament to a connected world. And yet the old South Africa was a separate and disconnected world. And still, we're seeing some of those ramifications in our corporate spaces. I deal with corporates and teams on a regular basis, and so often they say, you know, the biggest problem here is the silo mentality. And yet, you know, we live in this connected world, and yet in our businesses, sometimes we are separate and disconnected. And let's be honest, in some schools, it's like, oh no, you can't go in there, that's the headmaster's office. Or this is a problem for the maths department. Or that's a marketing issue. Or no, that's up to sales. Or no, Gauteng's doing really well, it's Western Cape that's giving us the headache. Or the other way around. And so still, our lenses are very often biased towards this, for whatever reason, this red behavior. Again, maybe it's upbringing or culture or the way we've been taught that things are separate and disconnected as opposed to connected. A quick story from nature. We were with a leadership group in Phinda in Northern Natal. And a commotion ensues at about 10 o'clock in the morning. It's broad daylight, it's 40 degrees. And this commotion is that a hyena has got itself into the bathroom. It's an injured animal, and it is now in the bathroom, and clearly this is a dangerous outcome. It is injured, it is a very powerful animal, and it's quite desperate, and it's cornered itself in the bathroom. So of course, all discussions stop. It's an infinite world. There are new possibilities here. Let's not get into strategy discussions when we could learn now what's going to happen. How are people going to deal with this? The local vet is called. His name is Mike Toft, an extraordinary human being. They dart the animal, and he immediately starts to perform some surgery on the back of his bucky with this hyena laid out, pink juices of cocktails and antibiotics going through this thing. He starts to stitch it up and patch it up. And we are there as a cohort enthralled by what is happening in front of us. We ask him, what are the hyena's chances now of survival? He says, well, physically, he says, I back myself as the vet. It's absolutely fine. But I give it only 50-50 chance. We said, well, why is that? He said, because he's lost his community. And it again struck us that, you know, as individuals, if we feel we are separate and disconnected, we have little chance. Whereas when we feel we are more connected, we've got a community. I know Margaret Wheatley's work relies on the fact that all answers can be solved by community. All answers can be solved by community. And that's, Louise, is exactly what you guys are doing. You're creating community in a world that is connected and moving away from this feeling, oh, well, corporate can't speak to schools. They're separate and disconnected. So, you know, we just are so privileged to be working in these spaces, and the work you do is so extraordinarily important at this time. The last of the 6 chapters, and then I'll stop because my time will be up on the, is something that again is so everyday and so in our faces so often, that power was always the thing that was seen to get things done. Strong leadership was about having authority and power to get people to do what they wouldn't normally do. And it could be subtle use of power, manipulation, it could be title, it could be more qualified, I have a better experience, I have a better degree, whatever. But it was hierarchical, top-down, command and control power that generally got things done. Militaries were built on this, and so too were organizations Newtonian from 300 years ago. Get things done through power, make people do things, have lines of authority, lines of reporting, and lines of accountability. And our schools developed as a result of that too. It was hierarchical, top-down. So did universities, where the vice-chancellor was God. And now we question whether that's true. Maybe there are also things called energy and influence, which get things done. People with no positional power The obvious example, of course, everyone uses is Gandhi, right? Well, Gandhi had no positional power, but he changed a nation. But again, Gandhi's hard to emulate. So where are we seeing stories of people that are using energy and influence to change their environment? And if there was one thing, I guess I'd say about leadership, it really is about how we influence others. How do we influence the situation? How do we influence the people? How do we influence our team? And how do I even influence myself and my family? And it's often not so much anymore about I have power over you, but how do I influence you through energy and through giving and through collaboration and through passion and through sharing a vision and through feedback? What is it that I'm giving in terms of my energy and influence, as opposed to relying on my title? And again, one learns these humbling lessons so often from one's children. Do this. Well, why? Well, because it's the right thing to do. No, well, why? Well, because I said so. Well, why? Well, because I'm your father. Come on, Dad, give me a better reason. Give me a better reason. And so how do I influence my children through energy and influence? And really briefly, and just to share two quick examples, there is the most amazing woman in Johannesburg called Mam Kanye. Mam Kanye started a thing called the Home of Hope. And over 20 years, she has rescued something close to 10,000 children off the streets and away from gangsterism, drugs, and particularly prostitution. She's done it herself and with her community and without a single cent of government spending. And she's not been able to do it once through any authority or power. She's only done it through energy and influence. And I would add, in her situation, love. And maybe we need to add that into the blue lens of how we get things done. Lastly, I'm a passionate golfer and enthusiastic, not very good, but passionate. And at the Wanderers Golf Club, just around the corner from where I live, is a man called Aaron. When Aaron was 2 years old, he was horrendously burnt by a Primus stove in a shack fire. His mother left the scene. He was left with no fingers on his left hand at all and only 2 left on his right hand. He never saw his mother again, and his father brought him up until the age of 14 when his father too passed away. Aaron often looks up into the sky quite spiritually and says at least he knows where his father went. He still never knew where his mother went. And Aaron has been a caddy at the Wanderers Golf Club for well over 45 years. And he is one of the most extraordinary caddies and human beings. He plays off a 14 handicap golf, which for somebody with no fingers on his left hand and only 2 on his right is quite a remarkable feat. But more important than that is that he's learned how to carry his high fives in his heart and his handshakes and his smile. Now, when you play golf with Aaron, you just cannot have a bad day. And he does things through energy and influence as opposed to anything to do with power. And these stories, I think, Louise, are all around us. And I hope that the book is just an examination, a reflection, an observation of the kinds of stories that maybe we're seeing, but not always noticing. And that maybe in those stories might lie some degree of learning and hope for what we might be able to do differently. And so I think that's the sort of half an hour, I think, Louise, that you allowed in terms of not allowed, I don't mean that from a power base, but in terms of encouraged. So I'm going to go off screen. You'll get these slides.
We will.
Please do visit the website at stevehall.co.za. It is a reinvention, and I think COVID has helped me to really think through a reinvention. So the website too is under construction and reinvention. I guess these things are never perfect, but please do visit. And thank you so much. Louise, really over to you.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, so we are going to come back and engage in a conversation with you. Before we do that, I've just got a few responses, and I'm going to use my power as a co-host to just share a few thoughts. So the one thing is as you know, everything we do in our organization is around shifting from red to blue. We realize that there's sometimes a requirement for that red behavior, but it's all around, and we have a vision for blue organizations, and blue environments and blue schools, and but I just want to kind of, sometimes we think we may be missing something. And then this week, someone sent me, and this is for everybody on the call, someone sent me a link to an interview between Adrian Gore and Hubert Joly. Did you see that, Steve?
I didn't. I haven't seen that.
So Hubert Joly it's just been published. So he wrote a book about his experience of turning around Best Buy. And the name of the book, it's called, I've only got it on my phone here, but it says The Heart of Business.
Mm.
And it's got a heart on there. And Hubert then he says that one of the things that's happened for him in this journey is he's moved from what we would describe as a red leader, so the leader who has all the answers and tell everybody else what to do, and it's my way or the highway, and that's how he grew up, and that's how he was as a McKinsey consultant, and that's how he was in his previous life. And he's realized that when he can step away from being that red leader, and he realized that his job is to create an environment where everybody can make their best contribution, which is what we talk about in that blue space. People step up, and then he talks about human magic. So I just want to say to you and your dad and everybody on the school, if you want to be inspired, I'm going to do a kind of reading club. I don't think we're going to get Hubert to be a speaker, but we might try. But we can certainly try to have a kind of conversation around for people, a reading, we'll get people to read the book, and then we'll have a conversation about what it evoked from you. So my invitation for you, and Igna has done such a fantastic job here. Igna, if you want to capture for us Hubert Joly, The Heart of Business. And then the other thing, Steve, which, I commit to showing up in these events as a lead learner. I don't want to, I'm coming to learn. So I came with so much openness today to learn from you. But you've made me realize something. So many years ago, I did some work with the guys from Appreciative Inquiry. What's that guy's name? I can't think of his name now. David Cooperrider. And he had a perspective on change, which I just want to bring into this conversation before we send people off to the room. But he said, if you want to make things happen, if you have a vision. So, for example, if you have a vision for blue organizations and blue schools and blue, a blue world, that vision becomes a provocative proposition. And he said, and what if, and this is what you did with the book, he says, what if instead of kind of cajoling people and you all have to become, do what I want you to do, you just simply put a spotlight on the examples of that blue world already in existence, which is exactly what you've done. And so I just want to, David Cooperrider would be very happy. So have a look at that idea of provocative proposition as a way, it's a change framework. But we're going to create, because we want to create a space where every voice is heard, and we know that the small group is the unit of transformation, we're going to ask you to go back into the breakout room. And in the breakout room, it's just an opportunity for you to express to 2 or 3 other people what struck you about what you've heard so far. So you don't have to be any more kind of deep and meaningful. What struck you? And you're going to be in the breakout room for about 6 minutes. We'll bring you back and just hear some thoughts and reflections from people. And I'm just going to put these people who weren't in breakout rooms before, I'm just going to invite you to go to breakout rooms now. So in the breakout room, what struck you about what you heard from Steve? And then we'll bring you back in about 6 or 7 minutes. So you should now all have received an invitation to go to the breakout room. No, you haven't yet. So sorry, that's my mistake. No, you should all have received it now. Sorry, Anna. Rita, did you get the invitation, or are you not able to go to the breakout room?
So there are many instances.
So I realized that this was a rude throw you back out of the room and bring you back into this main room. I get that. I'm sorry about that. It's one of those things. So, so we're going to ask everybody, just because you were in your small group and something I'm hoping kind of popped up for you. So would you be willing to just share in the chat what struck you as a way for us to kind of start this conversation? So we now have 17 minutes for a conversation and an interaction with Steve. There's kind of apologies for some people not getting a chance to speak. So Claude, if you want to share your thoughts, please do that in the chat. And then I'm going to, while we're waiting for that and while Steve is reading what people are saying in the chat, I'm going to just open the microphone. So anybody who wants to say something, if you just wait for a minute until I call you, then if you want to say something, and we'll hear from a few people. So Steve, you may want to take some notes, just hear from a few people, and then we'll come back. So, okay, now people have unmuted themselves. So if you unmute yourself, I'm going to call on you, or you can put your hand up but Margaret Turnbull has just unmuted herself. So Margaret, any thoughts, comments, responses from you?
I just, looking at the time, it has gone so extraordinarily fast. I think that says it all. For me, thank you, Steve, and you know how I feel about you, Louise. It really touches across the different leadership styles that are out there, and I've always believed that a way forward is for people to look and explore the different researches, the different types of leadership are out there, and find the one that is comfortable to you. You have to live in your own skin, and if you have something imposed, it can't work because you're not comfortable with it. But secondly, and I made the point in my group, I think the biggest task we have as leaders or people in a position of power is our responsibility to develop every individual that we work with, to enable them to succeed in leadership themselves. The words might not be right, but to let them see that they can. They're all the same as, it's just a job. It makes you different, and the importance of that to business organisations as well as schools. And I said, if a leader does that and they drop off a cliff, the organisation continues because everybody else within that organisation can pick up and run with it. When you see the big organisation or the schools fail, the leaders dropped off a cliff and nobody knows what to do and how to do it. I'll shut up.
Thank you, Margaret. Now, just Steve, so that you know, Margaret was a principal in the UK, and she is now working with principals in South Africa, and she's just an amazing colleague and friend of our organisation. So Margaret, it's always wonderful to have you. Margaret's heart is in South Africa, so she shows up at every conversation we're doing because she wants to just be in South Africa, but she's stuck in London because of this COVID thing. And
yeah, I can't.
So, okay, thank you very much, Margaret. And I'm sure, I mean, I'm going to just hear from a few more people, so because, well, I can say to you that Steve and I absolutely agree with you. That is our role as leaders, is to create that, you know, to ignite leadership in everybody else. And the question is, how do we do that? Through influence rather than power, because we know power doesn't work. So, Steve, while we're waiting for anybody else to unmute yourself, did you want to say something in response to what you heard from Margaret there?
No, I think, Margaret, you really do hit the nail on the head. And so often we think leadership is about creating more followers. And that may be a finite view of the world. It really is an infinite view to say that leaders are responsible to create more leaders, which lends itself to more infinite possibilities. That just growing a followership base is a finite, linear process. Growing a leadership base is an infinite exponential process, and the two are completely different. It's not, you know, yeah. So I'll stop there because I think you've hit it, and you must, the minute you can get on a plane to come back to South Africa, please come.
I also, I'm just while Margaret was speaking, and I'm kind of keeping my eyes here and on anybody else unmuting or putting their hand up. Sorry, you need to put your hand up either in Zoom or unmute, because otherwise I won't see you on the screen. But there was a comment in one of the comments around, you know, but how do you do that? Because some people are so disengaged, and I think that's the job. If our colleagues are not engaged, then Ben Zander taught us, then we get to ask ourselves, who am I being that other people are not engaged? And if we're all going to take that very seriously for ourselves, then this is the work. This is our work. So Gail Sturgis, I see you unmuted. Thank you. I was worried no one's going to say anything. Gail.
Yeah, I just think that some of these new aspects of leadership that we're going through right now, I don't think that they are teachable. I think they have to be developed. And I think that that's the problem with so-called leadership training programs that exist in the world. It was very easy to teach and train old style, if I dare say that, of leadership, the whole command and control, that red style of leader. To move to the blue requires development, not training. And it's how do we inculcate that into the whole practice of business?
And Gail, I cannot say enough that that's exactly our experience. Now, what I can say, I'm incredibly hopeful. So through Partners for Possibility, you will know, everybody will know that I don't let any opportunity go past without talking about that. But with Partners for Possibility, over the last 10 years, we have found 2,800 people have gone through this program. That we've kind of figured out, we've figured it out how to create programs that take people on a development journey where they decide to move from red to blue. So I'll tell you one story. One of the guys who joined the program, I need to be careful here to tell the story. His sister wanted him to do the program because she felt that he needed some development. He was a very red leader, very red leader. And then through the program, he kind of got to that point where the principal, what typically happens with this is the business leaders turn up very red. The principal say, no, I don't need this in my life. I've got enough of that in my life. Thank you very much. And then they exit. And then we have a whole process to kind of bring people back together again. And at the end of the program, after a year, he stood on a stage, and I have a video of this. He said, you know what I've discovered through this program? I've discovered that I was a complete arsehole. Sorry for any sensitive viewers. And I've realized that nobody really wanted to work with me. And the only reason why I did is because I was powerful and I was the CEO. And I've discovered what it looks like to make that shift. And I'm committed, and I'm inviting people to let me know when I show up as a red person. And I remember that many years ago in our organization, where I was a very red leader, I have to be clear about that. And my answer to that was to give my colleagues 2 pens, a red and a green, and a red and a green pen. And for them to just, when I do that red thing, to not shame me, but just put the red pen on the table. Let me know that I'm being a red leader. And that helped me to make the shifts. So I'm with you that it's hard, and I have enormous hope that it's possible because I've seen it. We've recently published our book, and what we are doing now is we're taking what we've developed through PFP and we're putting it into other places. So come to our session on 70-20-10. But what we did is we wrote a book. This is our book, and we captured the stories of impact and change. And my mother, who's 85, read the book, and she said, that's miraculous. It's miraculous what's happened. So there is a way, and we'd love to share that way, and we'd love to, make it possible for more people to use these ideas. So thank you very much for everybody who's sharing their thoughts. It's quite quiet, lots of beautiful notes in the chat. Steve, do you want to have a response?
Yeah, just to respond to Gail, and again, Gail, you and I should really have a cup of coffee because I think it's completely the right language. I think, and funny enough, Gail, I think it goes right back to either Aristotle or Galileo, and I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was both, but they said that we actually cannot teach people anything. all we can do is allow them to discover it from within themselves. And so why have we got into this realm or this mode of, well, we can train you to become a good leader? Maybe it was a reliance so much on the red lenses without really consulting the blue. And how do we create that development journey that all of us are on, and create opportunities for people to keep learning and develop without telling them that this is what you have to do, because it may not be relevant anymore. And I think you're right. So much of the work we do in leadership development is not development, it's training. I'd need to train you to become just like me, or train you to become like Jack Welch. Well, it's not relevant anymore, maybe. And even Jack Welch would stand up and say he wouldn't be able to lead in today's world. It was different then. And so it's requiring very different mindsets, I think, and different pictures of the world.
Thank you, Steve. So there are a few people who put their hands up. So firstly, Igno unmuted himself. Igno, I am delighted to have had you on the call, because it's just wonderful to have someone who's so resourceful. But did you want to make a comment?
Hi, everybody. Just very quickly, Steve, based on the lenses, I work very often with photography and leadership, and the lenses that you see over here. And the see, feel, do, be, what we've discovered with that was, if you see something, you tell a story, you make meaning. And the moment you make meaning, you have a feeling. And the moment you have a feeling, you take action. And when you take action, you get results. And yeah, so it works with photography. It's almost a lens. And I was just sharing in the small group that in order to change the picture and the meaning, you just have to do this or this. It's such a small tilt to move from green to red or red to green. And I think sometimes we're so stuck in red that we don't realize there's a completely different picture if you just do this or this. So I just thought I'd share that. Thank you.
So Igno, we now all thinking, because we didn't see you do yours, so I'm trying to see whether I want to bring you on the screen so that everybody can have you on screen if they're on, and I can't find you on the screen. So I'm not curious to know, what did he do? Did you see?
He pulled out a beautiful Kodak camera, like a traditional, magnificent one that we all remember. And said that if you really just want to change the viewpoint, it's just a small shift sometimes. I guess one could really flesh that analogy out beautifully to say, you know, we don't need to buy a whole new camera. You know, shouldn't be an expensive process. It shouldn't be, well, we've got to send all our people on this extraordinarily expensive training program, when sometimes it's just a shift in perspective. And that's a beautiful image, Igno. Again, we should also have a cup of coffee. And quickly to that point, Sane in our group, Louise, asked if, you know, would it at all be possible to come and talk to her organization? And the breakout room ended, and I hope she just saw that I had my thumbs up saying yes. So absolutely, I'd love to chat.
Yeah, so we would love you to make contact to Steve. We are kind of committed to create the sense of community. So keep us in the loop, because we just want to know what all the exciting things are that are happening. But please feel free to kind of just engage. And this is we as an organization are committed to blue leadership, blue organizations, blue ways of being, and we're going to do everything. We're going to amplify as much as we can around people who can contribute that. So I think Colin's just unmuted, but before we go to Colin, let's go to Mokgeta, because that hand was up before. Mokgetua Nyama.
Thanks, Louise. You know, I'm always so challenged by you know, the wisdom that comes when we talk around leadership. And somehow at the back of my mind is the question that, you know, the way we are raising our children and society, even in educational system, how do we suddenly expect that people now in the boardrooms will lead based on a principle-centered leadership? My sense is that the reason we are not so successful, you know, we are asking people who have learned, you know, and they have very good self-awareness and self-control, however, not really principle-centered. you know, and my sense is, you know, the thinking should be around how do we grow leaders so that their being, it becomes a natural way of leading rather than, you know, a way of being taught, you know, because I know, you know, like even when you were speaking about the home of hope, I know a lot of people who are doing good community stuff and whatever, but you can give without loving, and I know it. You know, you can create an enabling environment, but not really being in it. And I'm saying, how do we raise, you know, if you look at the bullying that's happening, you know, that's the whole thing, it comes up. And sometimes even when you look at leaders, you know, and you look at how they lead in different environments, I always find contradiction, but for me, it is really that sort of challenge to say, how do we raise principle-centered little ones that grow up to just be that, even when they get into corporate? Thank you.
Thank you, Mokhetua. So I want to say to you how our organization is committed to do that, and then we're going to hear from Colin and then Steve. Partners for Possibility. So, Colin, hold on one sec. Partners for Possibility is determined to develop the leadership capacity of principals and teachers, and to teach them, because it starts with them. It starts with the adults that the children are engaged with. So we know that children don't learn from, they learn from our experience. Well, they learn from what they see, educators do. And so parents and educators really need to get their act together because the children are watching. But let me hear, we're going to hand over to Colin and then to Steve. Now, in the meantime, Steve has put his contact details in the chat. Taryn is going to put the evaluation form in the chat, which would really, Taryn, are you able to do that now?
Yes, Louise.
Taryn? Okay, so Taryn is going to put an evaluation form in the chat. So it's really important for us to get your feedback. If you could just click on that link, it should not take you more than 2 minutes. And then while you are doing that, we're going to ask Colin and then Steve to just share their thoughts.
Hi, it's me. The thing that gives me hope, real hope and great encouragement and excitement was Marianne Williamson's simple observation that everybody is born blue. And really all we do is we get taught red by the system and the process around us, by schools, by parents, the ones that you've talked about. But so our task is to help people to remember. It's really not about anything more than you were blue, get back to blue. Some people stay blue and some people go red, and it's getting back to blue. So for me, it's the wonderful job of stories to help us to remember blue. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks, Colin. And I also just want to say, Igno has just sent me a note saying he's got another model that's kind of connected to this. Igno, if you can get your story into the Talk About Blue, then we'd love to create an opportunity for you to also tell us about what you are up to. So, so Steve, I just want to say thank you so much. I mean, I think it's a sin that we haven't done more work together, but hopefully this is going to be the next step. It's just been wonderful for me. I loved your book. Really want to encourage everybody. Please, please, please get a copy of this book. If you're a Kindle reader, I read it on Kindle and then I had a copy delivered to me as well. Thank you, Colin. And Steve, we're going to give you your last final. The other day I did a thing with Tuli Maranzela, and she did a beautiful thing at the end. She said she asked me whether I would give people just a few bits of patkos. So if you had to give us patkos, what would your patkos be as we just about to go back into our day jobs from this wonderful conversation?
Wow. I think it might be summed up. I mean, I'd love to share even more poetry. I'd love to share a whole bunch of things. And I'm sure our time is coming to an end. But I think for me, there's been a beautiful quote that I've lived with for a long time. And that is, goes something like this: when I reach the edge of all the light in my life, when I reach the edge of all the light in my life, and I step into the darkness beyond, I must find one of two things in place. Either there will be something firm for me to stand on, or I will have been taught how to fly. When I reach the edge of all the light in my life and I step into the darkness beyond, I must find one of two things in place. Either there will be something firm for me to stand on, or I will have been taught how to fly. And I think for so long in my life, it means that our role in any leadership position, in any position of influence, must be to provide some source of a platform. So is it a form of values? Is it a set of principles that Mokgeta talked so beautifully about? Is it a culture? Is it a sense of family love? Is it a sense of inclusion where there's something firm for me to stand on here? This is a VUCA world. This is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and it's even an e-VUCA world, which is it's now exponentially volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So what is there firm for me to stand on? Community is one, right? Community, and that's what we're doing, and that's what you're doing so beautifully. Or I will have been taught how to fly, which means I need to be empowered. I need not to be caged. I need to be helped, and not through just training, but through also real development. And I think it sums up my role even as a father. I've got to provide something firm for my children to stand on, but also I've got to teach them to fly. They can't stand on that thing forever because they've got to get their own wings with which to fly. So I hope that's some patkos, Louise. And from my side, thank you. It's been a wonderful, wonderful time to share with you, and to all of you on this call. Please share the ideas, the stories. None of these stories have a copyright attached, and I've never heard of a fireside tale that has a copyright. Of course, I'd love you to buy the book, but share the stories with whoever you think may find value in the stories themselves.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody. This was wonderful. I loved the experience. I do hope you've all just clicked on that link for feedback to us. If you've got suggestions for us around who we should invite into the series of conversations, we will also be doing a workshop with Steve around this. I think, Steve, that's going to be our next step, is to arrange a virtual workshop. So tell your friends, and you can all show up and be part of a proper 3-hour workshop with Steve on these 6 different polarities. So have a wonderful weekend, and we'll be in touch, and we will send you the links, all the links and the slides and everything else that Steve wants to send you. We will send that to you. So have a wonderful evening, a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you sometime in the future. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you so much, Louise. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Great session. Thank you.